So next we have a session with Kanwaljit Singh of Fireside Ventures. Can we have the AV, please?
Kanwaljit Singh is founder and managing partner of Fireside Ventures. Fireside is an India-based early-stage venture fund which focuses exclusively on investing in consumer brands. Kanwal has been passionate about mentoring and helping build consumer brands in India and has been involved as an investor with brands like Paperboat, ID Fresh, Epigamia, Yoga Bar, Licious, Mama Earth, Vadam Teas, Boat, and more. Kanwal has been investing in the early stage ecosystem in India for the past 19 years, first as a director of Carlyle Group, India, and later as a co-founder and senior managing director of Helion Venture Partners. Prior to his investing career, Kanwal spent over 13 years in consumer marketing with Hindustan Unilever and Intel India. He has over 30 years of experience in venture investing, marketing, sales, and business development across diverse sectors.
Please give a round of applause to welcome Mr. Kanwaljit Singh.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here. And I believe I have 15 minutes to do a presentation, which took me a couple of hours to make. So let's treat this a bit like a teaser to what could be an interesting panel after this, which I'm also a part of. And I just want to take the next 15 minutes, go through a few interesting slides and lay a foundation for something which is happening very much globally, but in a very interesting way in the Indian context, which is what we are calling the disruption of the status quo. This is the emergence of the challenger, the millennial, the new age brands, which have started almost creating a new environment. In the introduction, you saw some of the brands that I've been involved in. And this is just a very small subset of hundreds of brands which are out there. So what I've done is I have put together some quick slides to talk about what is happening out there, what is causing this interesting dynamic. And I'll try and share that. Some of them are very heavy slides, so I will run through a lot of them and hopefully capture the essence of what we are trying to say. And then, like I said, if the next panel, we can expand a little further. And of course, if there are questions after that, I'm happy to take those. So the one-line boilerplate on who we are. As it was introduced earlier, we are also a startup in the sense that Fireside is all of 2 years old. And we manage about $50 million of fund from our first fund. We are closing another fund, which is a $100 million fund. And we invest exclusively in consumer brands. And there are some interesting ramifications of that in terms of what it means to be an exclusive investor in a particular sector. And happy to talk about that a little later. Our vision of setting up the fund and how we think about ourselves is really we want to be part of this journey of the new age brands and want to see, like I said, hundreds of new brands come up, and can we be part of maybe 25 of them in the next decade or so. I think the sense which I wanted to leave behind in a very quick session was there has never been a time like now to build brands in India. And that is a very dramatic statement to make for a country like India with its complexities and with its great population. And there are several dimensions, several dynamics that are coming together which are allowing this opportunity to emerge. What I've captured here is basically 3 key factors. First is obviously the rise and the emergence of the millennial consumers. And I'll talk through some information on that. Second is the entire ecosystem for building brands is changing dramatically. And the third is the availability and interest of capital, which is becoming very excited about the space. And that obviously becomes one of the engines of growth and entrepreneurship to help brands build out. Let me start from the first aspect, which is obviously the most important piece, which is the evolution of this consumer landscape. This is a study which was done by the World Economic Forum along with Bain Consulting. And basically what they're saying is that if you look at the top of the pyramid, it's moving from the high, the middle income, upper income group from about 25% to 50% in the next 10 plus years. So in 2030, the consumption is expected to grow from 1.5 trillion today to $6 trillion. And fueled largely by one, the economic growth and therefore the increase in the size of the upper income pie. And second is the growth of the younger generation. The estimate is today that 77% of the population of India falls in what is called the Gen Z and the millennials, so roughly about up to 35 years of age in terms of the age profile. So here you have an audience which is young, which is economically better off, and which is looking for and demanding new choices. Some more data which is very interesting. I would leave information behind, which may be interesting for you guys to evaluate this. This is something which is actually quite a surprise for us as well. This is a comparison, obviously, with China, which we see in a lot of different businesses. And if you see, there are different categories where we have called out the per capita consumption of India as of last year. And it looks like, China had the same numbers 10, 15 years back. So it tells us that there is significant headroom that can be applied to what are the opportunity for growth here. I'm not going specifically into the data, it's right in front of you, but the gap between where China is and where we are just points out to the opportunity of how, and then of course, we can argue about what are the economic factors which will make it happen and so on and so forth. Another interesting dimension is it is not just the demographics, it's also the psychographics. This is a consumer which is very aware, which is digitally connected, which is extremely conscious of not just what is happening around them, but what is happening on a global basis. So we call this living in micro moments. They want consumption, they want media, they want information, they want products which fit their lifestyle. So if you see some of the trends that are emerging, there's a lot of consciousness around social causes, a lot of consciousness about purpose of brands, a lot of consciousness around the ingredients that go into the products, a lot of consciousness around how do I provide the best for me and my family, and therefore I'm willing to spend money on it. All of this sums up the opportunity for new brands, because this creates new, what we call white spaces. And these white spaces, for very good reasons, are not that easy for a large multinational or a large corporate to cater to, because they are more niche, they are more segregated in a way that you need to have a very different strategy of how you want to build these businesses. Some of the sectors that we are excited about and what seem to be emerging, on the left, if you see, there are some mega themes. These are more behavioral aspects. Consumers today, again, not surprisingly, want to look better. They want to eat better. They want to live better. But what does that manifest itself? It manifests itself in beauty. It manifests itself in wanting to provide your best for your children. In fact, kids is a category that we have seen has been a tremendous opportunity of growth, both in terms of number of brands and as an investment thesis. If you see the space of better homes, today's millennial consumer who are typically first-time home buyers They are extremely home proud. It's not just a shelter for them. This is something where they want to represent their own personality. And that allows lots of interesting brand choices, a lot of interesting opportunities to emerge. Let me switch gears a little bit to the ecosystem. Now, if you saw the initial introduction, I spent my initial 10 years of my career long back in Unilever, which is Hindustan Lever in India. And the way to build a brand was actually two dimensions or a single playbook. You go shop to shop across 100,000, 500,000 million outlets, and you do mass advertising on television, newspaper, print, etc. Now, that automatically made it impossible for new brands to get built because you need deep capital, you need a lot of working capital, and you need a lot of marketing muscle. What is changing is this ecosystem, which is not only allowing new brands to emerge, but also challenge the supremacy of some of the larger companies. Let me dig a little deeper into this. Obviously, the bedrock of this change is the digital ecosystem. This is data which is fairly well published and pretty much known to a lot of people. But the fact of the matter, again, is that where we are today and what we could be into 2023 is where China is today. And if you see, the numbers are very, very interesting in terms of just the opportunity. Now, this has two dimensions of opportunity for brands. One is the brand building, brand engagement, creating consumer connect. Social media, Instagram, Facebook, influencers, bloggers. And this is something which is changing the way consumers are engaging with brands. And that allows a young brand to build a very strong community, a very strong connect with the consumer without having to spend those millions of dollars that you would need to do in a more classic television and print context. It also allows you access to channels, which are very interesting because you can do a lot of things with the digital channels. And I'll summarize this with an interesting chart on how brands are getting built. Here is another chart, which is a 2-year snapshot of all the changes that have happened in the digital world. I mean, I could spend 10 minutes just walking you through this chart, but if you just see the sweeping nature of the change from e-commerce to media becoming now 250, 300 active million viewers on a monthly basis, to Swiggy and the Zomatos disrupting the entire food and food delivery business, to now with the Shop 101s, social sellers coming in and changing the next dimension of how consumers are accessing and buying products. I mean, this is a very, very interesting dynamic in just a span of 2 years. And that is what makes it both exciting and to some extent daunting. Actually, if I may be blasphemous, and I'm sure some of you are representing the large corporates, this is a huge question mark and challenge for any large corporate. Our fund has investment from companies like Unilever and ITC and Emami and so on and so forth, because everybody wants to understand what's going on. And I think this chart is a manifestation of both the opportunity and the challenge of how brands are getting built in the country today. Again, this is the same headroom message across categories, delivered in a slightly different way. We think e-commerce in India is big. I mean, we are not even starting out yet if you compare it to China. And the opportunity is huge across segments. So the big learning for us, even in a span of 2 years, was that we are not an FMCG, we are not an F&B, we are not a personal care fund. We are a consumer brands fund. And therefore, the scope can extend to every category of the wallet that a consumer is spending today. Last one, which is again quite interesting, markets, and you had a session just now, and you heard about the opportunities for investing in the market in India. the markets have been extremely responsive and positively supportive to the consumer brand space. If you look at Hindustan Unilever, market cap of $55 billion, which is 10 times of their trailing 12-month revenue. I mean, this is a SaaS company multiple if you look at a comparison to what the global benchmarks are. I did a quick check before coming here. The same formula for Unilever worldwide is less than 3x. So clearly, the market in India is far more bullish on Hindustan Lever's prospects than the global market for Unilever. And it's not a single story. It cuts across pretty much the entire spectrum. Let's look at what's happening on the private equity side. So this is a very exciting chart for all of us because suddenly we find that there is an alternate universe or a new verse, as Spider-Man calls it, where you're seeing people investing in consumer brands. And it's becoming more prolific and it's becoming very interesting. Involvement, like I mentioned, of the large players, very, very snapshot view. There's a lot more data and a lot more information available beyond this. But all the big players today are either investing or acquiring companies in this ilk of new age brands. I'm sorry, I'm rushing it and I have 1 minute left, so I will try and lock it. 3 case studies to wrap up with the summary slide. Look-in Coffee, have any of you heard of Look-in Coffee? Okay, there are a few hands up. Actually, I think it's pronounced as Luck-in Coffee. Basically, it's a China brand which is giving Starbucks a big run for its money. Started just 2 years ago. And what they do is they have completely flipped the Starbucks model on its head. They said, we don't need fancy places. We don't need people to come and spend time there. We just need a place where people can come, pick up their coffee and order on the app, pay on the app, and just pick up as a thing. 90% of the business is takeaway. 10% or 8% is delivery, and literally less than 2% is actually sit-in. So they don't even have too many sit-in options. $200 million revenue last year. Company went public on NASDAQ. If you see on the last point there, open NASDAQ at about $3 billion of valuation. Again, did my research today morning. It's $5.4 billion as of yesterday, market cap, for a $200 million company selling coffee. Beyond Meat, I'm hoping there are more hands which go up who have heard of this. A meat substitute business. Basically, the trend that they are supporting is the Western world can't live without their meat, but there is a huge amount of other aspects in terms of environmental issues, sustainability issues, health issues. So people are looking for substitutes for meat without compromising on the taste of meat. So if you want to have a burger, you will get a burger. It looks like meat. It has all the elements. And if I can be a little blasphemous, if you want a rare burger, you will have a beetroot juice oozing out of the burger. But it's all made out of vegetarian products. About 7-8-year-old company went IPO with an expected opening of $1.5 billion. They opened on the IPO at $3.8 billion. Again, this is May and June timeframe. July, as of yesterday, if you can take a wild guess, $13.4 billion market cap. So this is the state of China and the US. There is a company which is a local brand. We have the fortune of being an investor in this, called Boat. Started out as a smartphone accessory company. Got very quickly into audio headsets, earphones, wireless speakers, and so on and so forth. Very simple intuition. The audio headset market in India is 2,500 crores. The smartphone OEM market, where you supply the earphones to every smartphone that is bought, is $4 billion. Suddenly, the definition of market changes. This company has been growing at 300% year on year. They declared a revenue of 100 crores about a year and a half back. I'm not at liberty to announce their latest revenue, but they're growing at 3 times of revenue. In 2 years since we invested in them, they have grown valuation by 10 times. And total money raised as equity money for the company so far is $3 million. So it's a phenomena which is happening very dramatically. Let me summarize with just one slide, which is one of my favorite slides, is what is happening in the market here. Very simply, consumer research is being replaced by Amazon review mining. You want to launch a new brand, you can go on Amazon, you can understand. For example, Boat found that Indian consumers want more bass. There are film songs which are based on that thesis. And they built products which were very conducive to the Indian consumer. You use online for rapid prototyping. You can do a lot of very quick testing. You don't have to worry about inventory, about distribution, and so on and so forth. Get into some niche commerce players, get your early feelers in terms of what is working. And then you start getting into consumer engagement, celebrities, and so on and so forth. And eventually, you're looking at a hybrid model. India, we don't think, is a online-only market. It will always be a hybrid market. It will always have omni-channel strategies. But the way to crack this puzzle is really changing pretty much on an everyday basis. So let me stop here and hopefully add some more color in the panel immediately after this. And if there are questions, happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
So much, Kanwaljit. We request you to wait.
Sure.
And can I, the next panel that we have is on emerging Indian consumer. And can I request Ashish Goel, an IIMBue alumni, co-founder of Urban Ladder, to come on stage. Prem Shiv Kumar, co-founder and director of Growth Mechanics, founder of Smart CEO, to join on stage, please.
Thank you, guys. It's a pleasure to be here. If you didn't notice the photo behind, I'm glad because I think mistakenly it was Jayant Sinha instead of me on the photo, the ex-Minister of State Finance. It's great to be here. Thank you, Nimi, for the invite. Kanwal, that was a brilliant talk. In about 15 minutes, you took us from zero to $13.4 billion. Ashish, hope you're doing fine. It's not an Urban Ladder chair. I hope it's comfortable.
This makes me quite unhappy it's not.
Okay, great. Super. So just to sort of get started and involve the audience a little bit, I think Kanwal's talk spoke a lot about the consumer, the opportunity, the birth of new age brands, the use of technology, all of that. But I'm going to focus a little bit on the word branding itself. And if I can just spend a minute with the audience. So, not what, but who do you think is India's #1 brand? Modi, I can hear Mr. Modi. Who do you think is India's #1 brand today? Dhoni. Okay, I heard a Dhoni. Virat Kohli. Okay. And why do you think that? What makes a great brand? Passion. I can hear passion. Shout out. Brand recall. Anything else? Ability to get things done. Performance. Is that the larger than life, continuous engagement, lot of energy. Great. So that's, I think, all traits of, even consumer brands we're going to possibly talk about, right? So essentially, it's a persona. So let me begin with Ashish, if you can, take us through from your experience of building Urban Ladder. What are the traits of a super consumer brand, number one, and also how do you make it fast growing as well?
Right. See, I mean, generally speaking, my view is that good businesses and good brands are built by doing the boring stuff for a long period of time and just being consistent about it. When we think about Urban Ladder, the things that we have done well or the things that we have not done well, they've almost always centered around coherence and consistency. So coherence meaning you give the same message, same proposition, same communication across all touch points, across all channels, at all points to all customers. So that's the coherence part. And consistency, I refer to the temporal consistency, that you stay the exact same way for a good long period of time. A lot of times, when there are lots of discussions in our team also about, what should be the choice of the brand proposition, or what should we say, what should we not say. My push to the team, at least, is always that obviously it's nice to debate the specifics and the exacts and so on and so forth, that how should the logo be designed and how should the communication be done and what are the words to use and etc. etc. At least to me, what is more important is to make sure that you say that same thing again and again and again. Now, and I'm just referring to, you asked the question about some of the brands that all of us think about. At least to me, when we think about, let's say, Virat Kohli, we are fairly clear that Virat Kohli somewhere stands for, of course he stands for performance, but he stands for passion, his own variety of aggression, and that's what creates the brand image for us. And he's pretty much always like that. And I mean, one of the biggest challenges of brand building, funnily enough, is to stay coherent and consistent over time. So that's my simplification of what it takes to build a brand. After that, many other things, you obviously need to think through your consumer well. A lot of the other things are I would say more textbook. The real operation, the real sort of structural long-term challenge is coherence and consistency.
Thank you, Ashish. Kanwal, you want to take a shot at that? Traits of a super brand.
I think I would agree on the broader framework of what Ashish said. I just want to add a little bit more masala to the conversation. I think there is a lot of experimentation. There's a lot of almost, navigating in the early days. And, we are seeing that pivots are becoming almost a necessity in most of the businesses. We talked about paperboard. Some of you may know, it started off with a brand called Zynga and completely had to change the business. Epigamia started out with Hokey Pokey, which is an ice cream. So I would just add that, the foundation and discovering what the core DNA of the brand is and then how do you build it as a long-term moat. I think that piece is actually quite experimentative and quite interesting. And I think the big positive of being an entrepreneur is that you have that capability or that mindset to tinker and play with some of these big brands or large companies get a bit stuck with the guardrails of what you can and you can't.
If I may add to that, I mean, sorry not to contradict you, but those changes are when something doesn't work.
I agree. And,
that experimentation is critical, no question about it.
And very often, I don't think nobody starts with a plan of saying this is how it's going to work.
Yes, of course.
So we have found that, the willingness to be flexible, to experiment, to, course correct, that is characteristics of entrepreneurs that we look for. We don't want somebody to say, I know it all, and this is the only way to do it. Even if it's not working, I'm going to keep pushing that thing.
Yeah, in fact, even in your presentation, a lot of the terms are almost like a software business, right? You had A/B testing in there.
Yes.
You had.
That was deliberate.
Yeah, so basically, test multiple landing pages, different branding options. Wonderful. So, Kanwal, I'm actually going to sort of post the investor-oriented questions to you and the entrepreneur questions to Ashish. And the first question I have for you is, you have an entrepreneur, consumer brand entrepreneur who comes and pitches to you, I think beyond the obvious, big problem, large market, good person. What are the different things you're thinking about? What are you thinking about? What are you noting down when that happens?
So I think the first cut that for us, I mean, again, it's so common sense that it's not even, a big insight, is that you are ultimately backing the jockey every time you put money on the table. So our first, almost like a obsessive, point of view is how do we respond to the entrepreneur? And there we are looking for, I think, a combination of a few factors. One is the vision. We want people who are audacious. We want people who want to challenge status quo, want to think big. Second thing we want to look for is passion. And without passion, I think it becomes very much like a corporate job. And again, I have been in corporate life more than I have been in entrepreneurial side. But there's a big difference between how you evaluate. And the third is self-belief. So if we get that confidence, then in the diligence stage and somewhere we get into execution and those aspects. But to us, that piece, and there's some charisma, there is some people orientation. On the business side, honestly, the big things we are looking for is the insight. Because very often, India is such a great market that every segment in the market is up for disruption. So what is the insight that you are trying to pursue, and what is the disruption that you can make to pursue that insight? I think if that confidence is there, then, like I said, you can work around business models, you can work around different experiments, but is there something there which is interesting enough that you can create a big business out of that? So that's the, literally the first conversation we have with an entrepreneur, and then, of course, you...
Ashish, sort of a question from your own journey at Urban Ladder, right? So I think even Kanwal's presentation spoke about that, right? Better homes, where design is becoming more paramount, and I think that's what you do at Urban Ladder as well, where it's functional plus design. So how do you the question revolves around, how many products do you put out? Are you basically saying that these 10 are my hero products and I'm going to run after them? Or are you, dealing with a large SKU, set, if I may use that terminology?
Sure. See, there's no perfect answer on this topic. Of course, varies hugely by category, varies also by the belief of the entrepreneur about the market. And if you look at it like that, there are smartphone companies which have done extraordinarily well when they had, obviously Apple had, let's say, 3 or 4 SKUs and did extraordinarily well, and there was competition around the corner from Apple which had maybe 300 SKUs. I don't think there is any right answer on this topic. Of course, there is a Samsung which continues to, I would say, of course, there's a lot of competition in the market, but they continue to do interesting work for decades together in the market. I don't think there is a perfect right answer. I think it's a matter of your belief. Just to give everybody some context, we launched Urban Ladder in 2012, and at that time, 2012 July, I would say the thought itself of somebody trying to launch a consumer brand as a venture funded business, and that too as an online only business, I think was quite surprising. And we got that comment from obviously a lot of people. What is interesting is we launched 12 July 2012, we launched with 25 SKUs. And I remember massive conflict and fights in our team saying, you know what, I was handling the sourcing and product. So my entire team was saying, I almost felt like I was being super lazy because we only had 25 products. And at that time, our competition, we had two of our competitors who had already gone live. One of them had 3,000 furniture SKUs that they already had live the day we launched. And they had been in market for 6-7 months, I think. Yeah, 7 months. Our other competitor had been in market for about 3 months, and because this number rang in my head, I didn't know what to do. They had 847 SKUs in furniture at that time. And we were all sitting around, we said, we were able to do only 25 SKUs, so what's the option now? Might as well launch. We got to launch at some point of time. Clearly, we are never going to have, at the pace we are going, we are never going to have 3,000 SKUs. That just wasn't real. So we said, TK, we launched the karna hai. So we launched, and what's interesting is a lot of people, not everybody, a lot of people think that we were the first to launch furniture online in India. And that's absolutely not true. Factually not true. We launched 6-7 months after the first person, and maybe there was somebody else also, but these are the people at least we know. And 4 months after the second well-known company, and both of them did good work. So I think it's a little bit of a matter of belief. What you believe is the right answer. Generally speaking, if you are trying to create a consumer brand, less is better. Because, so right now, let's say we have roughly about 1,000 SKUs, and I can tell you, hand to my heart, am I absolutely convinced that all 1,000 of them make sense? Unfortunately, they don't. Unfortunately, that's just not true, because 1,000 is a big number. And of course, we are, in furniture, if you think about your own home, that's basically you're talking about literally 25-30 subcategories. There's dining tables, dining chairs, sofas, beds, shoe rack, kitchen cabinet, etc., etc. 25-27 subcategories. So in each of those, if I have 15-20 products, you have a few more. In some you're already up to 500-700 products. But it's the larger the product catalog, the more difficult it is to deliver whatever you believe is the right customer experience consistently. It's a little bit of a function of the category also. I mean, there are some categories where the availability of good quality, seamless product, good design is a lot easier. Let's say, some of the kitchenware categories, I would say, belong to that, where there is a lot of global sourcing available. India is also, some parts of it, India has a sourcing base set up. It's also a function of what you're able to ship, what you're able to deliver to the customer in the right way. So if I had to summarize it, I think not an easy cookie cutter answer. Let's say for a minute, arguably you could say that if and Kamal obviously knows many categories well, but outside in, you could arguably say that you could do a good ice cream business with 5 flavors. And every week you could have, or every 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, you could have one new flavor coming up. And that's a very interesting way to do a business in ice cream. And I think that's fantastic. I'm sure many of you have been to this place called Taza Thindi in Jayanagar, which I think is amazing, which has got 5 SKUs and does insane business basically, right? And that's great, 6 SKUs. So no perfect right answer there. What I would say is one of the typical forces of nature tends to be proliferation, where everybody tends to do more than less, and we have definitely done that many times over. We are principally in the furniture business. We should, there's a massive amount of work to be done in the business. I would say one of my big learnings is that, we generally have believed that, we are fairly focused in our work. But I think even when I say that, I think we could have been lot more focused. The value of focus, which also translates into X number of SKUs, X number of categories that you work with, and so on and so forth.
Can I nuance a little bit? I think the biggest interesting phenomena that we are seeing is that I think this debate, I totally agree with Ashish that it's, finally discovering category and what your DNA is. But the discovery, you use the word hero products. I think that process of discovery has become very interesting. So the whole concept of A/B testing, the concept of putting small lot out there, the concept of testing different consumer segments with different products, different packaging, even different brand names, all of that is possible in current infrastructure. So while I'm not questioning on answering on the number of SKUs, but I think like simple example, one of our companies called Mamaearth, they launched a range of baby products. So the obvious ones were the shampoos, the talcum powders, the diaper rash creams and all. Their best-selling product is an anti-mosquito spray, which is all natural. And they discovered that in a process which was very efficient. In the lever setup, I would spend 2 years to discover the hero product before I even launched it. Then you are so invested in it, you have no choice but to give it all you have. Today, that whole dynamic is changing. I think that's the more interesting aspect of it.
Actually, that's an amazing point. In the product discovery process, the number of times that we have been blown away by some of the things. We just to give an example, we launched upholstered beds about 3.5 years back, and I'd been seeing the product for some time, and I was like, in India, there's so much dust. Consumers are always, concerned about upholstered sofas. Who is going to buy upholstered beds? Very tough to maintain. Obviously you can't take the fabric off. How do you clean it, etc., etc. People use oil in their hair. Lots of households. It just won't work, and I just refuse to believe it. One of my team members said, I don't know why he believed it would just be a good idea. He told me, what, this is a risk, just let me take this one risk. And I said, okay, fine. I told him, if it doesn't sell, please, you are going to make a house out of these beds, because we have to ship one container. And that's ended up being super successful. I still don't understand how customers manage the product, but customers love it. I mean, I would not buy one. I think it's just incredibly tough to manage.
Don't worry, this is not being recorded.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I think the point I'm making is, I think in building a consumer and brand business, you have to be humble, because you have to accept, and especially when we are talking about building a direct to consumer brand, I think that humility is very easy to come by, because you get if you want to, you can hear the consumer's voice straight up, and you will be. I mean, I'm very happy when I'm wrong, because that just sort of means that we have learned something fantastic.
So Kanwal, one thing that was sort of amazing from your presentation, especially the case study of boat lifestyle, was that $3 million in equity capital and 100 crores in revenue. Obviously, there was the e-commerce, a whole e-commerce infrastructure available for distribution, which is amazing. But I'm also the question to you is, are these new age consumer brands being very careful about spends on marketing and advertising? Today, you see a Byju's and all the tech players, sort of being there in cricket matches and mass media. And it's actually, tables have turned a little bit, don't you think? Is that why do you see that happening? And, is that a sort of decision that you've seen in your portfolio companies as well?
So I think there are two aspects to this. One is it's in the DNA of the founder and the partners who are around the table. We firmly believe, and maybe it's just our conservative nature, that you do not need to spend serious amounts of money on pushing for top-line sales till you get your basic foundation right. So, the way those building blocks are getting built today, like I said in my presentation, there is a significant opportunity to spend less, move faster, and still be able to establish that, whatever the foundation of the business. So our belief is that today, I mean, again, very thumb rule numbers, you can build a 100 crore brand with 30, 40 crores of investment. That itself has been a big revelation even for us from where it was. Second is that I think there is a very different narrative which we are questioning. which is that grow faster because that increases value of the business. So, we are finding that there is a certain mindset which is unfortunately born more by investors and less by entrepreneurs. That, the only metrics of performance and therefore valuation is the top line growth. So we are contrarian in a certain sense. You will see, therefore, example, I can do like-to-like comparison of companies where we have invested or somebody else has invested, and the amount of money being spent to do a certain. So I don't think it is a necessity or a need of the hour. I think it's really the mindset with which you are doing a business. I think today the problem is not so much about how much capital you can raise in equity. The thing is how much smart capital can you raise. Quote, for example, I didn't mention that, has a credit line of 100 crores. So it's not that, $33 million or 20 crores of capital was all they needed. But they had a very smart business. They sell to Amazon. Their customer is Appareo. So therefore, they have a very secure, lien on that money that is being parked with them. They have a positive EBITDA business. They have never lost money ever. So why can't they raise debt instead of equity? So I think the dynamics of business building, especially in the consumer brand space, itself is changing a lot. So I personally believe that it's going to get more efficient and less, and that's what at least we are confident.
Wonderful. Just another question that popped up, during your presentation is that how much of influence do foreign markets have in your ability to invest? A young entrepreneur comes, he wants to recreate a look-in coffee of China. Obviously, that's going to make you sit up and take notice. So how are you evaluating such deals? As in, there are many such places in India today, actually.
I think as long as there is a India version of it, that's exciting. The good news is that India, being such a large consumption market, you don't have to look for global examples. I mean, you can create businesses in India which are designed for India and meant for India. But yes, a Luckin Coffee, a Away Luggage, a Beyond Meat, a Casper, these are all inspirational examples. If you can build them for the Indian market, I think that is the biggest disconnect. If you can find an entrepreneur who says, listen, I can disrupt the mattress business, but do I even understand what the Indian mattress business is all about? I think that is the important connect. But yes, we certainly look at global examples as benchmarks of what is happening worldwide. On the other hand, we are seeing also the reverse. We are seeing businesses like Vadam, businesses like Ayurveda Experience, who are taking the India story globally. So we are very confident that in the next 10 years, you may start seeing some global brands emerging which are originating in India. So it's actually working on both sides of the.
Wonderful. Ashish, just a question actually somebody from the audience also asked, and I think you get this question all the time. Online versus offline, I think you guys are looking at offline stores both as a branding effort as well as experience center sort of model. Your thoughts on how that's panning out for Urban Ladder?
Sure. Yeah, so just to be clear about it, we are not, so our stores are not branding efforts at all actually, nor are they experience centers. So just to clarify, I mean, we started in 2012 as a online only business for the first 4.5 years of our existence. 100% of business was online. And so for us, the stores, are the single reason for existence of our stores is conversion. And, actually interestingly, I was having this conversation with somebody in the morning today who's in another business, and they were thinking about doing stores. And, my unambiguous push to them was that it just doesn't make any sense. And we took a long time ourselves to make up our mind, because it's a very, very big call. To do, it sounds very easy, but to do a multi-channel business is disproportionately more difficult, because it's two different DNAs, different set of learnings, different ways of engaging with customers. Just fundamentally, it's two different businesses. Now, the reason for us to do the stores, the way we think about life is that, you imagine, this is a big funnel. At the top is our online platform, which is where we engage with as many customers as we possibly can. And obviously we try and convert as many of them in the online funnel. People who don't convert, and there are 2 reasons, I'll talk about them, talk about those 2 reasons in a minute. What is the blocker for consumers to convert, and which are insight about consumers to convert online. But people who we are not able to convert, who we are not able to cross into the purchase process, we would like them to come over to our stores and clarify whatever is the barrier to conversion for them. So our stores are very clearly conversion channels for us, and if you visit our stores, now that I've shared this thought with you, you'll be, I think you will see why the design of our stores is absolutely in keeping with the thought process of what is there that helps the customer cross the barrier of conversion into brand Urban Ladder. Now, and I just want to share, talk about this a little bit, because this question keeps coming up a lot. Lots of people obviously are building online first and online started businesses or brands. And it's a very, it's naturally every business is trying to scale up faster, challenging, how do you manage your cost structures to scale up, customer acquisition cost, and offline will come up many times as the option to choose. I think it's very important to go back to the consumer and ask that question and try and really understand in detail why do you want to do a store? Answering that why, I think, is super critical. See, for us, we saw two consumer behaviors which were very important, which made us make that switch, and which we see consistently in our stores. The first was there were some categories of products, and I'll just talk about that. Some categories of products where truly the consumer was not able to make a decision without the quote-unquote touch and feel. Touch and feel, to me, and we see this behavior in our stores, actually does not apply to categories like beds, dining tables. Really, there is nothing much to touch and feel. As long as the dimensions, you understand the dimensions, the look works for you, and you believe in the brand and the quality, that's what is the closure for the purchase decision for beds. However, for seating products, all of you are sitting on a chair, especially for complex seating products like sofas, people are, everybody's height is different, build is different, the way they sit is different. So the ergonomics is really a challenge or a problem which till now we have not been able, we don't believe we have solved it in a truly deep and satisfactory way online alone. And that's one, touch and feel, especially in seating products, the first. The second, and that's the interesting part about the category I operate in, which is probably very different from, let's say, shirts or building materials or whatever else, right? Which is that our category is a multi-decision maker, multi-generational purchase process, right? Most often, literally I would say 65 to 70% of customers who come to our stores, of course there are multiple people in 100% of the cases. Almost never do we see one person making the full decision. Even if even that person is living by themselves, they will have some family member, some friend or something. But most often we see not just multiple people coming for the purchase decision, we see a multi-generational purchase decision. 2/3 of our consumers, whether in the first visit or in their second visit, come to the store with somebody from, there's a primary decision maker of the purchase, and there's either their older family members or younger family members, or a niece or a nephew or an uncle. Somebody will join them to close the purchase decision. And these two variables make the stores very relevant for us. So I would say that, answering that why is, I think, critical. If you ask me, I think the story of how many stores in how many cities, etc., will play out over a longer period of time.
Super. I think we are running short of time. We have 1 billion people, so we can keep talking about consumers in India. But thank you so much, Ashish. Thank you, Kanwal. Over to you.
Thank you so much. To felicitate the guests, can I call Kavi Panjwani
Harish Mittal.
and Bhanu Reddy on stage, please?
Thank you.